Hey guys, this is David. I know you're here for episode 3 of Reading Seth, and it's going to start in just a minute. We'll call this the prelude. I've already filmed the episode and taped it, as well as actually edited the whole thing. One thing I did notice is it was actually kind of long. And it's a little bit longer than what I want to do and how I have to upload it and whatnot. So what I'm going to actually do is this one's going to be kind of a special case episode. What you're going to see is there's going to be kind of an episode 3A, 3B, and 3C. I'm going to break it into thirds. They're probably going to be 15 to 20 minutes long. It actually is a longer episode when you compare it to episode 1 and 2, but actually the content is just great. There's a lot of meat in there, and I didn't want to cut anything out. I want you guys to get all the value just as much as I did, and definitely get the feedback and the kind of the responses and ideas that I had as I was checking it out. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with 3A. 3B will be following up right behind it, as well as 3C. But what you're going to get is the entire March 2002 episode number 3. It'll just be in 3 different parts, an A, B, and a C. Well, listen, with that, let's go ahead and get started with it, and you guys have a great one. Welcome back. I'm David Adams, and this is episode 3 of my sub-channel, Reading Seth. I read selected blog posts from Seth Godin's blog, organized mostly on a monthly basis. For this episode, we'll be reading three of his posts from March 2002. At this point in history, copyrights, market disruptions, and their impacts on large industry-standard media businesses were a major topic in the national discussion. Much of that debate centered around the fear and trepidation that large print, radio, and TV companies were experiencing as their historical strangleholds on communications with consumers were being disrupted on an almost daily basis. Make no mistake, there's a lot of content to these 3 posts. Seth had plenty to say, and it was targeted directly at companies that were behaving in a tone-deaf fashion while clamoring for politicians to protect their weakening kingdoms. This month's posts are titled, Almost 2 Years Ago, from March 18th. My note to Senator Hollings, also from March 18th, and Op 10 Matters, that was published on March 29th. The first 2 were published on the same day, but the first, almost 2 years ago, is actually a republish of an article that he wrote for a website targeted to media insiders. Realizing that Seth had already addressed these issues 2 years prior to the events that were then going on highlights that he had been trying to raise these topics from much earlier. The material was just as appropriate in March 2002 as it had been in 2000 when he originally shared it. As you're going to see, the ideas are also just as appropriate today in March of 2018 as they were then. I'll intersperse commentary as we're reading, plus I'll have some final thoughts at the end. So without further ado, we start with Almost 2 Years Ago, originally posted in 2000 but republished on his blog on March 18th. The editors at Inside.com, now alas basically defunct, asked me to write them a longish piece about new media, copyright, and monopolies. As I was preparing to write a note to Senator Hollings about his ridiculous proposed copyright legislation, I kept coming back to this article. Here it is. I told you it was long, and I haven't updated it or edited it. I still think the message to the media companies is right. If I didn't, I'd hide it. You're a monopolist. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course. If you're reading this magazine, it's likely that you're a successful member of the profit-seeking entertainment industry. And if you're making money in movies, books, music, or TV, it's because you take advantage of a legacy of monopolistic or maybe oligopolistic practices. Having a monopoly is fun and exciting and fraught with power. It's also intoxicating. How else to explain the hubris of 3 of Hollywood's best and brightest launching a well-funded website that managed to go out of business before it even launched? If you're used to being able to corner the market, it's easy to think that another medium is just another medium. How else to explain the exploits of the RIAA as they valiantly duel with Napster, trying to put the genie of widespread music distribution back into the bottle? They're used to having a monopoly on the distribution of music, and they want it back. How else to explain the antics of the book industry as they stumble their way through the minefields of Microsoft, Stephen King, and free e-books? Publishers control the distribution, not these weenies, damn it. It was great to be a monopolist. Steady profits and no hassles. It would be great if we could stay monopolists forever, wouldn't it? We have to understand the historical context and the audience to whom Seth is now speaking. As he's going to note, big companies had dominated the production and distribution of content through the media for at least a generation. In the written word, it was big publishing companies. For music, it was the record labels exercising their control over radio stations. For visual content, TV and movies, it was Hollywood production companies. Seth's call out was a shot across their bow by stating the obvious. Being a monopoly is great until you're not one. But if you've been one, your success has been much more as a result of the barriers to entry for your competition than anything that you've been doing. As more of your customers get more choices, they're not going to stay one long. It still plays out today, even 16 years later. Cab companies are fighting a battle that they're also going to eventually lose against Uber. And their response is not better service or better offering. It's a call for politicians to impede the disruptors and protect their kingdoms as more and more residents of the realm keep walking back out the gates. Okay, back to the post. Before you call the Justice Department, let me explain. The limited supply of content, the few choices of distribution, these practices are all legal. Most of them are actually enforced by the government. But understanding where these monopolies came from and why they're going away fast will give you a new way of looking at your business. And it turns out that this sort of analysis can open amazing new markets and new ways of generating profits. We know that if you offer a smart consumer two products that are absolutely identical, same quality, same brand attributes, just as convenient, she'll choose the cheaper one. Gas stations have price wars, but movie theaters don't. Supermarkets lose money to sell milk, but TV markets are dedicated to turn a profit on just about everything. The heart of the media business is the prospect of being a monopolist, of getting paid a lot more than our products cost to make. And when the monopoly goes away, there's not a lot of room for obscene profits. In markets where people have a choice between equals, the cheapest and most convenient often win. Over time, the media business has done everything it can to be sure that consumers don't have a choice. After all, a CD increases in price about 25 times from the time it's made to the time it's purchased by the listener. And a TV ad that cost a network $0 to broadcast might end up selling for $1 million. There are three things that led to the monopolies we now enjoy. Number one, the FCC limited number of TV and radio stations in every market, allowing 3 networks to dominate TV and record companies to dominate radio. Number 2, copyright ensures that we can charge a lot for a book or a record, way more than it costs to make. Number 3, the limited number of physical distribution outlets, record stores, movie theaters, guarantees that distributors with clout get more shelf space. This triad is responsible for the profits you're enjoying right now. Imagine a nightmare of a world in which all 3 legs of this stool disappear at the same time. Time to wake up. It just happened. The monopolies are dying, and they're getting deader. Quick aside. When you note the 3 legs of this stool, Seth was right that they were dying and getting deader. Any honest observer in these industries would have to admit that it is even more so today than it was when Seth wrote this or he republished it. The only barrier to entry for content producers in the audio or video space right now is the time it takes to make it. The gateways to audiences have expanded exponentially, and the need for content has never been greater. The breadth of those gateways and the array of content that is freely accessible to consumers makes the idea of copyright almost worthless. Creating walls to content is an exercise in futility because there is always someone else who will provide that content or another acceptable alternative without the block. And where open distribution was a disruptive force around the turn of the century when Seth first published this, that was still years before iTunes, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and YouTube arrived on the scene. Distribution, once monopolized by a few large players, is nearing a commoditized service today. Creators no longer have to grovel for distribution of their content. Channels fight through features and monetization to attract the creators. The past, the glorious profit-making, fun past of the media business was based on scarce creators under long contracts, scarce retail outlets able to be controlled with marketing muscle, scarce spectrum, few radio stations and few TV stations, copyright laws, and a lack of technology that limited theft of services, limited power of the creators to compete without a large media company as a partner. It's hard to outline a point of view that shows the power of any form of media getting stronger over the next decade. There are going to be more TV channels, not less. More ways for authors to distribute their works, not less. More ways for musicians to connect with listeners, not less. More ways for consumers to sample or take content, not less. You were a monopolist. You're not anymore. To succeed in the old days, here's what you had to do. Choose any two. Number one, grab a piece of the electromagnetic spectrum, hopefully one limited by the government. Number two, buy up the supply of actors or writers. Number three, establish long-term profitable relationships with distributors and retail outlets. Welcome to the new century. In the new century, we all have the same goal. Number one, establish a direct and positive relationship with the end user. It sounds easy. It's not. It's scary. It's likely to wreck your business before it saves it. Doesn't matter. The truth is, businesses that don't aggressively pursue this tactic will disappear. Here's what you do. Go to Sticky Flicks. David Burke, a successful TV producer of animated wacko content, has assembled a few brilliant scoundrels and put up a site filled with juvenile humor, most of it in bad taste, and really neat animation. And people are flocking to his site. Not because he's spending big money or licensing the interactive rights to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. People are flocking because of digital word of mouth and the viral nature of the web. How dare he? He has no big studio money. He has no relationships with CAA, and he doesn't exhibit at Cannes or in at West. Yet he has the audience around the world. Yet he's building characters with real value characters that will become toys or movies or t-shirts. He has violated every single rule of the old order, and he's still succeeding. Could you imagine this happening 10 or 20 years ago? Now, do this. Send a note to subscribe@catterbooks.com or visit Book Publishers Lunch. You'll get a free subscription to Publishers Lunch, a daily newsletter chronicling what's going on in the book business. It's free, of course, and it's always interesting and occasionally juicy. It's written and distributed by one guy who every day increases his power by talking to thousands of people in the book business. Could you imagine this happening 5 years ago? Sorry to remind you, but consider the Drudge Report. 4 years ago, nobody had ever heard of Matt Drudge. Today, for many Americans, he's one of the most important news sources. He paid no dues, didn't work his way through the corporate hierarchy, owes nothing to the head of the network. Hardly seems fair, does it? Last experiment, go to Live 365. They currently list more than 17,000 different radio stations, all live, right now. Big question. If one station is playing a lot of ads, how hard is it for you to find one that isn't? If you're a station manager used to competing against 1 or 2 stations with similar format, what happens when there's nearly 5,000 nearly identical competitors? Can you imagine a situation like this happening 18 months ago? Okay, I can't resist. One more try. Go to Nutella. There you'll see the successor to Napster. This version is the one that the music industry brought upon itself by going after the original. Nutella has no database, no offices, no centralized server of any kind. There's no one to sue, no one to blame when greedy consumers start sharing music, images, stock photos, and soon, movies. Are all 3 of these examples perfect businesses bound to bankrupt you and your peers? No way. They're nits. Chinks in the armor. Little businesses that might get bigger. Sure, there are tons of examples of well-financed new media companies that went under. That's not the point. The point is that individuals with little or no money are building real media properties that are attracting the consumers that you want to attract. There will be plenty of carnage and disappointments in this new arena. Who cares? What matters is that there is a new arena. Its mere presence means that the monopolies are dying. I had coffee with an executive producer of a network news show last week. He told me that every year, in addition to getting smaller in size, his audience, on average, ages almost a year. The people he needs in order to maintain his monopoly are finding something else to do with their time. Need more proof? Take a look at TiVo and Replay. These digital VCRs have tiny audiences, but expect a bunch to sell this Christmas. It's easy to dismiss them as toys for the digerati. Easy except for one fact. 80% of the people who use one of these devices skip all the commercials during the shows they watch. All of them. Imagine. So much for the business model of the most powerful medium of all time. Seth has mentioned two things that we need to view from our perspective in 2018. First, parts of this post are dealing with that climate as it related to Napster, music sharing and copyrights. He highlighted a new player, Nutella, which would follow on Napster's heels but would become even more problematic for the music industry due to some specific technical evolutions that he'll mention. That said, neither Napster nor Nutella could have hinted at the ever greater disruptors that were soon to come. Apple iTunes, later to become the Apple Store, and Google's Play Store were the final death nails for CDs in the old way of selling music when consumers were allowed to purchase music a la carte. Secondly, Seth mentions TiVo and Replay, suggesting how they would soon change generation-old industry of television marketing. Interesting, only one of these two became a recognizable brand, but TV advertising would never be the same once it entered the wider audience of viewers.